President Xi Jinping met with selected political advisors and legislators as part of the annual two sessions tradition. What key messages did he want to deliver this time, and what personal panacea did he employ to connect with the different groups? And China's Greater Bay Area project is moving full speed ahead, but what bumps along the road remain? Welcome to The Point, live from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. First of all, a glance at maybe the most important story that we're hearing everywhere. What a development. We were still discussing the possibility of direct talks between the US and the DPRK just yesterday, and this morning the whole world woke up to a big surprise. US President Donald Trump has jumped on the request from the DPRK leader Kim Jong-un, as conveyed through a Republic of Korea delegation, to meet directly before even consulting his advisors on the issue. Such direct engagement has long been what China had been calling for. Now that this prospect is on the horizon, China of course welcomes it, as has been expressed by the Chinese government. However, it is too early to speculate on what would come out of such engagements. There will be fanfare, it might go back and forth, there might even be some kind of agreement reached, but that would not mean the end of the crisis, as was the case with the agreed framework between the two countries signed in 1994. Because of the deep mistrust between the two sides and the changes in US domestic politics, that agreement was not effectively implemented by either side, and the crisis deepened. To really make steps towards peace and reconciliation, much more would be needed than saying yes to a meeting. It's nobody's guess how things will develop this time, but to sit down and talk is always a good starting step. What China looks out for are genuine efforts made by any party to denuclearize the peninsula in peaceful means, however long that might take. Now, each year during the two sessions meetings in Beijing, the Chinese President and this year Chinese President Xi Jinping would join panel discussions with political advisors from different walks of life and legislators from different regions. This year, President Xi chose to join Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference members from two non-communist parties, people without party affiliation, and overseas Chinese representatives. He also joined national legislators from Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region and the provinces of Guangdong in southern China and Shandong from eastern China. Why did he choose to meet with these groups specifically, and what messages did he want to deliver, and what's special about his delivery of these messages? Joining me for the discussion today are Victor Gao Zhikai, Global Counselor for Asia Society, and Edward Li, Managing Director of the law firm Li & Xu LLP in Beijing. Welcome, gentlemen, to the show. Thank you very much. It's very interesting. I want to start with the Chinese word, which means joining these panel discussions, but the Chinese word actually means go down to the panel discussion. Victor Gao, what does that word mean here?
Well, first of all, in this particular case, the Chinese President Xi Jinping, who is also the General Secretary of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China and the Chairman of the Central Military Commission, who also is a delegate to the MPC, he goes down to these provincial groupings of the MPC delegates, or to the groupings of the CPPCC members, not only to meet with them, to sit down to take photos with them, but to engage in substantive discussions with them, to solicit their opinions, but also to comment on the questions many of them would raise. I think this is not only symbolic, this is very substantive, and I think he walks around and attends quite a few meetings this time, and I think the reports coming out of this basically indicate to the whole CPPCC members as well as MPC delegates, but also to the national audience, what he thinks about, what is his major ideas.
Right, these meetings are widely reported. Mr. Lehman, what would you compare this kind of joining in panel discussion to? Anything in the West that you would find a word to describe it?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually trying to get the hearts and the minds of the regular folk. And I mean, when you look at it, this is very carefully orchestrated, as is many things in the United States as well. I mean, where you might have Donald Trump who's going back to Michigan and talking to different people. In this one, for example, the Chinese diaspora, the return Chinese, this is, I think, a very strong message for people, even like Victor Gao and other people, who have studied abroad, that made in China, in the new thought and the new era, and what China is going to be all about, is going to be integral on the education that they've received abroad, and that they're welcome here to do things. So that would be one example of that.
It's a kind of town hall that he gives. However, President Xi also goes around the country and visits different grassroots units, people in their villages, in their homes. What is the difference between those kind of connecting with the grassroots people and these kind of town hall meetings?
For example, President Xi Jinping attended the provincial delegation from Shandong province, who were all MPC members on March the 8th, which happens to be the International Women's Day festival, which is widely celebrated in China. So he started the meeting by congratulating all the MPC female delegates and the CPPCC female members, but also he used the opportunity to express his personal wishes, as well as the Central Committee and the central government's wishes to all the females in China. And don't forget, the First Lady, his wife, is a native of Shandong province. Whether it is purely coincidence or by, well, a good design, I do not know, but it's a very endearing moment to the delegates from Shandong province, because they welcome him not only as the top Chinese leader, but also as the son-in-law of Shandong province.
Right, but what are so this is one reason probably that he chose to go to Shandong panel discussion, but what about the other choices? For instance, as I mentioned, the non-communist party, this time the Democratic League, which normally is made up of high-level intellectuals from the art, from education sector, and then there is the Zhigong party, which are made up of people who are returned from overseas, and then there are the Guangdong province in southern China, where the economy is really it's really on the forefront of China's economic reform, and then there is the Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region, which is northern China, facing completely different challenges. Why such a combination of choices, Mr. Lehman?
Yeah, I mean, just unpacking, if you look at Inner Mongolia, for example, again, that would be very consistent with the message about the new era and trying to eradicate and eliminate poverty by 2020, which is incredibly ambitious. That's 30 million people that they're looking to move out. That's larger than the country of Australia, many countries in Europe, for example. And so he went there, I think, specifically to talk about poverty alleviation. And like I said, it's a very carefully orchestrated and organized message.
He didn't choose this group randomly. He didn't choose the topic randomly.
Right, and nor did the people with the kind of dialogue and the discussion that he's having when he goes there is flowery too.
Well, as far as the MPC groupings are concerned, there are close to about 40 groups. Each province and municipality and autonomous region would have one, and then the PLA has another one, then several other entities. And on the CPPCC side, you also have roughly more or less about 40 groupings. So for the top leaders, because the 7 members of the Standing Committee of the Politburo need to visit one or several of them, so by definition, you know, the top leader, Xi Jinping in this particular case, cannot have enough time to visit all of these almost 80 groupings, for example.
Within 2 weeks' time.
Absolutely. He needs to pick and choose. And I think these choices are very well made, and there must be a purpose to visit these groupings, and I think we can go into much detail as to
what
why.
Can we read, for instance, the 4 key messages that have been conveyed during these meetings? For instance, when he was meeting the Democratic, so-called Democratic Party and people with non-party affiliation, he talked about the importance of building a new consultative system or relationship between multiple parties. And then in Guangdong, he talked about innovation. So what kind of messages does he try to deliver through these visits?
Well, you know, I think there's got to be a bridging too with this, with the National Supervisory Commission and these types of things. Again, with intellectuals, there's another group that he had met with, which is traditionally intellectual and the non-party affiliates. Is to try to really get a consensus, because you don't want them to feel disenfranchised, in my opinion. And with regards to Guangdong, again, they want to be pushing up high technology as opposed to what they were doing in Dongguan and these types of places where there was cheap labor. They want it to be drones, and they want it to be ZTE and Huawei and entrepreneurial type of undertakings.
So he's really, through these meetings, he's really sending out messages he want to highlight in the making of the national policy and the implementation. However, what is new between this year's panel discussion compared with the previous years or compared with previous Chinese leaders?
No, I think this year, for the two sessions, President Xi Jinping visited more groupings of the NPC delegates and the CPPCC member groupings. And according to the count, he visited almost 7 or 8 of them, or in total, for example. And this is truly very impressive. My impression is that he wants to meet as many people as possible. He wants to meet with them, shake their hands, listen to them very carefully, and also talk to them directly about all their concerns and questions. And this really helps to push the message from the very top of the Chinese leadership to all these delegates for the NPC and the members of the CPPCC, and this really will serve to rally the people, especially because at the NPC this year there are important matters to take care of, the amendment of the Constitution, and people want to see that they do have a very good, beloved, respected leader that they can trust and they can follow. And I think the messages are very clear, and through these meetings with the CPPCC members and the NPC delegates, the messages get across to the whole nation, to people of all walks of life, in a very clear and loud manner.
But how are these meetings organized? How do they go? For instance, is he just going there and talk and tell them what he thinks, what he wants to do, or you know, what kind of communication is going on, Victor?
Yeah,
I don't know, Mr. Li later.
Yeah, for example, I listened very carefully, I watched very carefully President Xi Jinping's participation in the Shandong provincial delegation of the NPC delegates when they talk about all the important issues. And President Xi Jinping listened very carefully. 8 persons, all NPC members from the Shandong province delegation made speeches. President Xi Jinping listened to them, compared notes with them, commented on their speeches, for example. And the speakers include the provincial party secretary, Mr. Liu, and the provincial governor, Mr. Gong. And I think President Xi Jinping's comments on what they said in their respective speeches really drove the point to a higher level of analysis, and I think he was very well received by the NPC members from the Shandong provincial delegation. And I think the fact that the First Lady is from Shandong really makes this meeting, to me, and my ancestor also came from Shandong province, a very heartwarming and enduring moment. Yeah. So people want to vote for the Chinese president.
Well, I think another feeling is the kind impression that I have is the kind of warm atmosphere in those kind of meetings, which is really different from what people would imagine of such a high caliber meeting where people would be serious. So, but there are laughters and people grabbing the microphone and really making the best use of the opportunity to talk to the top leader.
Yeah, exactly. And we spoke about this a little bit before the show as well, which is, I mean, there's genuine interaction. I mean, and as a China watcher for a long time, a lot of times I look at some of these governmental speeches and they carry on with this sort of pattern, which is reminiscent of some other bygone era.
Or scripted.
Right, it's scripted. I mean, and I'm not saying this is not well orchestrated, but just like it would be in the West and just like it would be in Europe and just any other place. But there is some genuine interaction. There's some genuine compassion and thought processes. And I mean, here's a person who had at one time, you know, lived on a farm, and it certainly came to Iowa and visited farms and visited the ambassador from the United States on a farm. So I mean, this is somebody who's relatable, quite frankly, to the folks he's talking to, whether those be the folks from Shandong or the people from Inner Mongolia and whatnot.
Another thing that is interesting that I noticed is the kind of languages he used that people take away from these meetings. For instance, he would use very visualized language where he talked about the problem facing poverty alleviation work in Inner Mongolia. For instance, he used the metaphor that don't oversell these projects, otherwise you would have a work that's like a small pony dragging a big cart. You know, you won't be able to sustain that kind of expectation. Why does he choose these words to convey his message?
I think President Xi Jinping really stands out among other very senior leaders in the Chinese government and the party, because he really had very in-depth experiences as a farmer, more or less in exile, basically, from Beijing to the heartland of Shanxi province. And then he worked from all the levels in the government hierarchy, from the country level to the prefecture level to the provincial level, to becoming the party secretary of a province, for example, then to the central government, to the central party leadership, etc. He had both military experience as well as civilian experience. So when he speaks, he really speaks his mind to the people and uses a very, very folksy language that people can relate to directly as on a person-to-person level.
So that his message can go as far out as possible. We have to leave it there. Many thanks to my two guests, Victor Gao, Global Counselor for the Asia Society, and Mr. Edward Liman, Managing Director of the law firm Li & Chu LLP in Beijing. And that is this topic. As I said, this is a very important season, political season for China, and it's a unique Chinese practice for Chinese presidents to join panel discussions with political advisors and top legislators during these sessions. Now, the choice of the panel that the Chinese president joins, the topics, the messages he delivers, and the communication style all carry significance for the country's future. In addition to the many grassroots visits he makes around the country during the year, these are rare opportunities where he connects with high-caliber advisors and people's deputies up close and personal, and vice versa. Such communication is not only important for policy making and implementation, but also for the cohesiveness of the Chinese society. You're watching The Point with me, Liu Xin. We'll take a short break and stay with CGTN. China is rolling out its development plan for the Guangdong-Hong Kong-Macao Greater Bay Area, or GBA. In this year's government work report from the first session of the 13th National People's Congress, the country's top legislature, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang said that the GBA development is a major part of the country's promotion of coordinated regional development. What does this development strategy mean for the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region? And how will integration with the Chinese mainland evolve? Joining me in the studio is Dr. Witman Hung, MPC Deputy from Hong Kong. He is also the Principal Liaison Officer for Hong Kong at Shenzhen Qianghai Authority of South China's Guangdong Province. Dr. Hung, thank you very much for joining us. I understand this is the first time that you attend the meeting as a MPC Deputy from Hong Kong. Congratulations on that. In one of your proposals, you suggested that more fluidity is required to meet the sound development of the Greater Bay Area. Why do you make that proposal?
Yes, if you look at the Greater Bay Area, it's one country, two systems, free customs and free different kind of legal regime, as well as four major cities. On one side, one country, two system is a blessing to Hong Kong and also to help the development of Greater Bay. But on the other side, it also there's some artificial hindrance from, we always say four flows, the flows of money, people, goods, and information. And right now, all these four, there are certain different kind of obstacles. So what I'm proposing is, at least, I think in the human side and people side, we should lower the barrier, we should improve the fluidity of people flow. That's what I suggested. Number one is to give Hong Kong, the Chinese citizen within the Hong Kong permanent resident, a PRC resident card, the same as the normal mainland Chinese resident
so that people
card.
Can travel more easily.
Not only just travel. Travel right now, there's no problem. The problem is opening of bank accounts, opening of, buying a mobile card, try to get WeChat payments, things like that. All these things need real person verification, and without a mainland Chinese resident card. Hong Kong people, they do now have a travel card, which is a two different system, two different numbering system, two different chipset. It's very difficult to integrate, and also there are certain restrictions. For example, I can't go to a hotel, it's not open to foreigners. which is kind of strange because I don't look like a foreigner. So these things, so I'm proposing on one side, this is letting Hong Kong people to enjoy, well, Chinese citizens within the Hong Kong residents to enjoy the same privileges, same treatment as mainland Chinese residents, so that they become part of the Greater Bay. On the other side, I'm also proposing the introducing of a Greater Bay travel card. This is more given. Will be more given to the Greater Bay residents within the Guangdong province, as well as foreign people who station in Hong Kong. Because right now, if you have a foreign citizen stationed in Hong Kong, you have a passport, with multiple entry visa, you have to queue a long queue every time you cross the border. You can't travel with your fingerprint, right? But if I give you a card, and you can go to the fast lane. So, and also this will remove the restriction of this 1 week, one trip per week restriction for Shenzhen people to come to Hong Kong.
Right. Well, during this year's government work report, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang said that the GBA is a coordinated regional development initiative. So what coordination are we seeing on behalf of the central government and on the part of the Hong Kong Special Administrative
It's yet to be seen. There are many proposals. I have put in a proposal that we should have the top level official to do the coordination. Because you see, again, as I said, you have a provincial government, you have 2 SARs, you have two deputy provincial cities, and then you have another 7 that is normal cities. So, and also because of the opening up, because of the development, we will need the help from various ministries in the central government under State Council to lead this coordination effort. What I'm also proposing is to have a standing body, like a secretariat of such a coordination body, so that it can help. Because a lot of these things, my experience with viewing all these kind of coordination, it needs a lot of follow-up. You can't do it with one meeting. So the ministry have to go back, they have to think about new policies, they have to change current laws.
So somebody has to be there to specially cater it.
Push it through.
Okay. The Premier also stated that the central government will continue to support the Hong Kong SAR in its integration of its own development into the country's overall development. How do you think Hong Kong can accommodate the overall economic
I think
development?
this only makes sense. Right now, Hong Kong is a mature international financial center. It has been helping the opening and reform of China for the past 40 years. But right now, there's a lack of growth in Hong Kong. We have an average growth about 3.8% last year. Our industry are very focused on finance, property, a bit of logistics and trading, and also on tourism. Because there is a not real economy in terms of light manufacturing. Whereas if you look at the whole Greater Bay Area, they have a huge, the full, I would say, value chain. Anything from research to applied research to manufacturing to logistics, everything is there. So if Hong Kong can integrate into that, then we become part of the Greater Bay. It's not just a city, it's a big, I would say, group of cities, or maybe a metropolis, I would say. And then in this case, Hong Kong can play its role still as a financial center, still maybe as a a fundamental research center. We have some good universities, but then the other part of the value chain can be filled by the other cities within the Greater Bay. So it is not easy. This is why I think both the Premier and actually President Xi Jinping also mentioned that it's how to facilitate Hong Kong into integrating in economy development of China, because in fact of the things that I just mentioned about people. Because Hong Kong residents are treated differently. They're treated not as foreigner, but as like outside of the border.
Outside of the mainland, let's say.
Right. So there are certain restrictions in terms of residency, employment, insurance, medical insurance. All these kind of things right now that have been implemented in China are not applicable to Hong Kong people. So if they move in, for example, if they move in to try to find a job, trying to work there, it's hard for them.
That's right. Well, some people argue that there should be efforts to leverage Hong Kong's advantages to meet the needs of the mainland, and then some other people argue that it should be the other way around, to leverage the country's or the mainland's advantage to meet Hong Kong's needs. What is your take?
I think it's mutual. They're both right. On one side, as I said, Hong Kong lacks the growth, lacks also the technology and the depth and the industry base, so we need to leverage, and also to leverage the speed of growth of mainland China, especially the Belt and Road Initiative. On the other hand, I think mainland China also needs to leverage Hong Kong in terms of the international connection, in terms of good legal system, in terms of its workforce, highly professional people that are geared towards world standards, and the finance center that help us to do financing.
Another proposal you made this year is to build Hong Kong in the future as a safe harbor for international data. What do you mean? Why do you make this proposal?
In 2016, China passed a law in terms of data security, in which data of Chinese citizens are not allowed to get out of the boundary of the country. Okay, but in real life, if you think about all the international e-trade, e-commerce, it is almost impossible. So there needs to be a way to allow certain data of Chinese citizens to be outside of the boundary of the country. Okay, Hong Kong is one country, but outside of the boundary. Okay, so we provide a natural place for people to hold such data. Now, we still need to maintain national security, restrictions on in terms of personal privacy and things like that. But Hong Kong, is one of the pioneers in privacy laws. Okay, and its law is actually very close to that of the European Union. Mm-hmm. And then if we do use private contracts, commercial contracts to bond the way how the data are hosted, and if the data center they are willing to oblige to follow the China's data security law, I think it would make sense for us to allow certain appointed data centers in Hong Kong to host such data. The next step, we should go to the European Union and say, why don't you do the same? Because they have a white list as well. Mm. So in the future, what I really want to do is to put Hong Kong into the Switzerland for data.
What has been the reaction to your proposal, very briefly?
Positive, but not through.
So
I've been pushing it for a year, actually.
Right, right. But do you understand the kind of process? You will get feedback, but there might be several years of discussion before anything concrete could be realized. Are you ready for that?
I think there's a demand for that, and I think it only also makes sense for the central government also to move in this direction. There are certain ministries that are already quite agreeable to this, and also I'm getting the help of the liaison office of central government in Hong Kong to help the push it through as well. The SAR government is behind this. So we have the bit and pieces. Being an NPC deputy put me in a position to actually raise it at the national level. Okay, but I think to follow it through, we need multiple parties to get it through.
Right.
So I'm actually quite positive.
So how are you feeling so far, being an NPC deputy, putting forward such proposals and possibly making a change for the future?
I think that's my job. I should do that.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Witman Hung, NPC Deputy from the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. And that is it for this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with Alex. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.